Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the TRN ST2. The ST2 is a follow-on to TRN's popular ST1 model from a couple of years ago. It was a popular model. It was very affordable, sounded fine. Everyone had pretty high expectations for the ST2 to make an updated, more modern version, bring up the sound quality a little bit. I'm not sure they hit that mark, but they certainly tried. So I do want to thank the TRN discount promo store for sending this sample to me. If you're looking on AliExpress, they're actually otherwise known as Shop 5876990. But I will put a link to it, and you can see it's on their store today at $12.65. So like the ST1, it maintained its very affordable price. It is a 1DD, 1BA, and it is in a very attractive clear shell like TRN has been doing with the MT1. So you can kind of see that beautiful DD is in there. Clear shell, little logo on the outside. QDC connector. And if we look closely inside the nozzle, that little black square right there is actually the BA pointed pretty much straight into your ear. So that I think introduced a little sharpness to it. That's not my favorite, but yeah, kind of a nice looking set in general. This one, I actually had to use foam tips. For those of you who are fans of foam tips for taming treble, I was using foam tips, and it gets you at least part of the way there. So this is some of the newer, fancier TRN packaging, which I haven't seen yet. So nice colorful packaging, which was quite nice. This is the standard stock cable, kind of a thinner standard TRN SPC with a little QDC, can't really see them, QDC with the rounded edges, and a silver 90 degree with a little T logo on the outside. So that's the standard kit. So let's kind of get into it. So as I said, maybe the first problem was this BA right in the nozzle without maybe a filter or something. It's kind of harsh having, in general, people are sensitive to BAs and nozzles. I'm not as picky about that, but in this particular one, the way they tuned it, it's quite sharp. There's a kind of a raw sharpness to that upper mid, lower treble that's fatiguing to me. So as I said, I was using foam tips. You can try other tips like these Final E. I mean, I'm not sure you really want to go spend $10 or $20 for a set of Final E tips for a $10 set, but people have been trying that. If you're a believer, get out your finest copper cable and see if that helps. But for me, I pretty much just went with EQ. It's the only thing that's going to kind of get this one back to a listenable range. So I would not use this one without EQ. So the sound, and before we kind of get to it, this a slightly dry V shape. And for those of you who are familiar with the MT1, maybe from about here back, it's very similar. So that DD portion, that mid-range and lower mid-range and bass is very similar, same bass level to the MT1. And then as you get into this upper range, the upper mid-range, and then into the treble region, it sort of goes off in a different direction, whereas the MT1 stayed kind of reasonably conservative. The ST1 jumps up quite a bit in level, and that's what we're really hearing with this shoutiness, sharpness. There's something going on there in the upper mids, which is just a little beyond what I find comfortable. And so, yeah, if you're going to EQ, it's basically this whole section right there needs to be brought down a good bit of decibels if that's what you're going to do. So slightly dry V shape, and it's got these crispy, sharp edges because of that boost to it. So that BA with that kind of peak, it just adds a really sharp, there aren't any soft edges, nothing is all that smooth, everything has a hard edge to it, and it seems like they were trying to introduce a little more detail or clarity. Whatever they did, it was just a bit over the top for me. So the bass, like I said, it's not all that far from the MT1, so there's a nice little mid-bass bump, and it's got this faster decay, so it feels just a little bit too fast for pop music, but very clean, textured, and again, I had to EQ just a little bit to give it a little more body and warmth because it's a bit dry for me. If you're into clean and clarity, that's what it is. If you like your pop music with a little body to it, just EQ the bass just a little bit. It's got a, you know, it's a nice size DD. It can handle quite a bit of EQ. So that's what I did, and that definitely helps. But the bass in general, compared to the MT1, which has a more conservative upper range, this one, the bass is a little more down in the mix, and it's more of a supporting role than a primary role. So the mids, it's almost too clear, too dry. There's tons of transparency and clarity, but as you move up that curve, those female vocals, those upper mids, those lower treble, all that stuff is just a little bit too much, and it gets a bit thin and tinny and very fatiguing without EQ. They sort of hit that peak for me, which hits me right in the center of the ear, and it becomes very fatiguing. So the lower mids, kind of the same, kind of what I said before, it can use a little more body with EQ because there's such a high, the balance is sort of shifted towards this upper mid range. Everything is just a little thinner, a little lighter. It just needs a little more body to balance all that out. So that's what was needed there. And then as you get into the treble, there's quite a bit of sibilance without EQ reduction. So I ended up bringing the whole treble down a bit, and that's going to reduce your sibilance. It's going to make it a little more less fatiguing, but then at the same time, you're going to lose a bunch of detail in that treble range. And so it became this balancing act of, would you rather listen to it longer with less fatigue or hear more detail? So you'll have to decide on your own how to deal with that. And the tips, foam tips alone will kind of get you part of the way there, but to get you to a less fatiguing area, you may need something more like a bigger EQ drop to do that. So staging, there's a bit of height to it, not enough. It can be wide, but it's this one really falls between the ears, and between the peak and everything between the ears and it being fatiguing, this didn't quite hit me in the right spot. I wouldn't call this a successful follow-on to the ST1. There's just a couple things that don't fit with my personal preferences. So the staging didn't really help too much in this. Even if it is wide, it's really sort of a linear width, no depth, and not enough height, so it all feels very focused and fatiguing in front of your face. So not the best. So average resolution, even though there's a ton of sharpness there, they're trying to force some kind of detail to it, but it's just a little bit too much for me. So that's it. That's a quick spin through the TRN ST2. So perhaps they will release an ST3 and address some of these upper range issues and bring it down to a more comfortable level next time. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.